Hi, my name is Linda Lay. Welcome back to DEBAKEY CV Live, the CV Sisterhood in Surgery webcast. This is part 2 of mentoring the millennials in the digital age. Today we have 3 wonderful guests who are range from students to resident. We have Manuel Rojo, who is my chief resident here at Methodist. We have Leanne Grafmueller, who is a PGY1 integrated vascular resident at University of Rochester, and we have Sudie Ann Robinson, who's a 4th year at SUNY Upstate Medical University, who is applying for 05 vascular surgery residency. Of course, I have my wonderful co-host Palma M with me today again, and we'll just dive right into things.
It's great to be here today, Linda. This is great having all of you here. As Linda said, this is part 2. You are the millennials, and you're here to guide us. Mentoring trainees and students over the years has evolved. Digital technology and availability of information on a global scale has impacted this. The leaders in vascular surgery are committed to helping the trainees and students mature into outstanding physicians and surgeons. As you heard during the last show, mentoring today is very different from 15 to 20 years ago. Nonetheless, the need for high performance in this intricate field has not waned. Changes in educational platforms, duty hours, wellness, and overall performance assessment has evolved. We are also acutely aware of the disparities in gender, age, and race that have been an obstacle for many of us over time. Things are better, but by a small margin. Those of us who are female, of color, or other sexual orientation have had to make disproportionate sacrifices to get even close to the same level as our peers. The COVID pandemic has also changed how we think and live at this time. There's been backlash against bias, conscious or unconscious. It is now time to level the playing field. It is not through anger or disrespect, rather through an awareness and humanness that we are all equally talented and deserving of this opportunity to take care of our patients the best way that we can. Some have suggested that this change needs to happen at the earliest time frame in our careers, possibly as far back as high school or college. So here we'll hear from our guests today how we're doing with respect to that.
And remember, you can join by web, go to pollev.com and enter DEBAKEY, or join by text to text DEBAKEY to 37607. And please, this is an interactive show, so if you have any questions, please text or poll in, and we'll be taking questions throughout the webcast. I just want to give a special thanks to my new partner, Tricia Roy, who has helped us with curating some of these questions today for our millennial mentees. So I guess I'll start with Manny. So Manny, what do you look for in a mentor? And do you have any mentors outside the program?
Yeah, so, there's mentors and then there's mentors. And what I mean by that is there's mentors for your professional life, there's mentors for your personal life, your spiritual life, your psychological life, whatever it is. And I think you have to look for different mentors to fit those roles. Somebody who's a great professional mentor, for example, a surgeon that you love and you look up to and you want to be like, may not be the best role model for your personal life.
No kidding.
So I think that absolutely, one of the questions was, do you have mentors outside of vascular surgery and outside of medicine? And yes, I think, one of my biggest mentors in my life was one of my priests that I had growing up, because he's been able to mentor me not in vascular surgery or in medicine, but in my personal life. And so I think it's really important to find that. And what do I look for in a mentor? I guess the most mentorship from a mentee point of view starts with admiration. Usually it's somebody that you look up to, that you want to be like, somewhat of a superhero to you. It sounds kind of silly coming from an adult, but I think as adults we also have our heroes, people that we look at and we say, man, in 10, 20 years I would like to be that person. I would like to have some of those qualities that person has. And that's the first step, I think, that leads one to search out that person as a mentor.
Leanne, where do you find your mentors?
Yes, so I have found mentors both organically by chance And I've also participated in structured mentorship programs as well. So in my life prior to medical school, I participated in a structured program where I filled out a questionnaire and based on my responses was matched against a database of available mentors. And at first I wasn't matched with someone in my field, and I was truthfully disappointed in the beginning, but it actually turned out to be such a valuable experience because they helped me adjust and learn how to function in a complex organization and understand the value of developing interpersonal relationships in order to get my day-to-day tasks done. And then 2 years into it, I asked for a promotion, and they helped coach me through what would have been a very intimidating conversation. So I think having mentors outside of your program and field of study is really helpful, and I would encourage everyone to seek out mentors in that way.
That's actually a brilliant idea. It's like eHarmony or Match.com, but ends up not being a disaster, you know? And so, Sudie, what about you? Like being in med school, has it been a challenge, or have you know, obviously you're going into vascular surgery, so are your mentors vascular surgeons, or do you have other mentors that have helped you along the way?
So, yes, let's start with, for me, what I was looking for in a mentor. I mainly needed somebody to give me guidance. I haven't said this as yet, but I'm a first generation high school, college med student. And so all throughout each years, I've had to navigate those situations by myself, and it was very, very difficult. So I took a break after school as well as after college, actually, for 5 years, and I worked in research and had developed a good relationship with my PI. And she helped me with the process of getting into medical school, along with other staff at Upstate that helped me along the way as well and served as mentors. But while I was here, I actually first learned about vascular surgery through the Vascular Surgery Interest Group with Dr. Katan. And she really took me under her wing initially and helped me to build my portfolio, and just provided a lot of information on conferences, on different research opportunities, different workshops, and things that would help me along the way while I go through medical school. I also met Dr. Shah, who from all these different women have like different, as Manuel said, different ways to help me out. So Dr. Shah is one of those individuals that you can call her at any time and be like, she'll give you the pep talk that you need that will just help you get through the day. And sometimes you need that individual to really help you to feel confident, to help you to understand the different rigors of the day, and that it's okay to sometimes fail and just get back up. So having a mentor on so many different levels really just help as a whole to help the student to develop as they go through this whole medical school journey and later on into their field of interest.
That's actually fascinating. You know, Manny and I were talking about this about a week ago, and how, you know, being Hispanic. So yeah, I know you were talking about like your first generation, high school, college, and I know you said you had difficulty finding mentors growing up because, you know, SVS just put out their statistics, and you know, there's only 6% that are Hispanic and 2% African American that make up our, you know, the diversity of SVS, which is improved. Obviously, we are making improvement in that and increasing our diversity, but that is still a low percentage. And so some people say, well, that, you know, this recruitment needs to start even sooner than residency, sooner than fellowship. It needs to start all the way in high school and college. And so, Manny, why don't you talk about your experience? I mean, it sounds like everyone here has hustled to get mentors.
Yeah, I think, you know, like you, my parents immigrated from Mexico. I was the first to go to high school, first to graduate college, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, I think once you get into medical school, things get a little bit smoother. At least that was my experience. But when you're in high school and even when you're in college, if you don't have strong mentors, if you don't have family members or friends of the family that can mentor you, you kind of have to go out and find them on your own. Mm-hmm. So if you're connected and you kind of have an uncle who's a doctor or a cousin who's a doctor, that, then things become easier because it becomes easier to find a mentor. But if nobody in your family is anywhere in medicine, then you kind of have to go cold turkey. And for me, when I was in college, that was the biggest challenge, is that jump from college to medical school, because to get into medical school, you don't just have to have good grades, you don't have to have a good MCAT score, et cetera, but you actually have to have experience in the medical field somewhat. You have to have people write you letters of recommendation, mm-hmm. You have to have so many volunteer hours, and that kind of stuff you don't really find easily, and you have to seek yourself. And so I think that if the goal is to recruit whatever X group of people into vascular surgery that may be underrepresented at the moment, it's kind of crucial that is targeted all the way from high school, even middle school, to get people interested in medicine. Because if people never become doctors, they'll never become vascular surgeons. If people never go to college, they'll never become vascular surgery, et cetera. So you really have to start early if you want to target a specific group of people and increase that population in our group of vascular surgeons.
Palma, I would agree. I mean, that's absolutely true in terms of recruiting even before they get into med school. And the ways to do that is we're still figuring it out, I think.
I'd be interested to know from their perspective, the millennials, how can we help you better? How can we be better mentors to you in this era? Because we're looking for guidance so we can help. Leanne, do you have any thoughts on that? I thought you might.
Yeah, so I think for our generation, I'll start by saying, I think as we're earlier on in our careers and as we're medical students, we are intimidated by potential mentors. As Manny said, we look up to many of you. We want to be like you. We aspire to become you in the future. So I think being approachable and available and advertising that you have time and are willing to enter into a mentor-mentee relationship would really help mentees feel that they can approach you more.
Sudie, from your perspective, you have a very interesting background, and they haven't seen your personal statement for your application, but I have. And your path has been really incredible, and I'd like you to just mention a little bit about how you got to really where you are actually, and how you found your way to be the medical student that you are. Excellent, hardworking, and committed to patient care.
So for me, it started in Jamaica, in a small town, Linstead, St. Catherine. And I immigrated here for college. Didn't even know about New York State or anything like that. Thought I was going to New York City and ended up at Ithaca College. So that was quite a shocker for me when I was driving past all the hay fields and like where the big buildings are going. But it all started there, and I have always had a love for science, for medicine. I always wanted to become a physician. I just didn't know how that path would happen, because being a first-generation medical student, financial reasons often impede you on your path. And as such, throughout college, I've had to work numerous times, work several jobs to just get by. But I've had the opportunity to find individuals that really helped me with this whole process. And I think for me, being non-traditional helped a lot, because I've had 5 years of working in research, and that's where most of my connections came. So the research opportunity helped with my applications, and really just helped me to meet more people that were in the field, and that helped to boost my application in general. However, on coming to a medical school, it was very hard initially. being African American and, well, being Jamaican really, but kind of finding my place in medical school. So finding a mentor was even much more daunting, because a lot of times it's when we have mentors that look like us, just being honest and pretty candid, it really gives us that sense of hope, that sense that I can make it, that I can be that vascular surgeon, or I can be that physician, because I have that individual that looks like me, or at least take that interest in me as well. So I'm sorry, I hope I'm not going.
No, keep going, keep going.
But I was just really fortunate in my first year through the vascular surgery interest group during medical school to find Dr. Gatan and to find individuals like Dr. Shaw and Dr. Costanza who really just took me in and helped me with the whole process, because I had no idea. I didn't know anything about vascular surgery. Well, first of all, I didn't even know that I needed to apply again for residency. That's how naive I was coming in first year. I just knew I got into medical school and my whole family was excited. Everybody was happy. And then now I had to figure out all these little nuances of medical school and with limited help. So having individuals and also having groups such as the C-STEP program, which kind of helps science and STEM, individuals in science and STEM programs, that really also helped to give me the resources that I needed to really get through medical school and to later on get into vascular surgery, hopefully next March.
Sure will.
So, all of y'all have seemed to work, so hard in your, early career, I would say, but you've definitely, like I said, hustled to get where you are. And, the argument is from maybe like the older generation, oh, the millennials, they don't want to work as hard, they want to have this work-life balance and, wellness and not burn out. And so what is y'all's perspective on that? And do you think that's a stereotype? Is that untrue? Is that true? Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I don't know that I'm the best person to answer this question, because I've often been referred by people as old school, and having more of an old school mentality in this respect. My mentality is that vascular surgery is 5 years or 7 years, whatever it is, and it's those 5 years you have to learn absolutely everything you can and to absorb everything you can from your attendings and from your patients. And so I agree that there should be a limit and there should be some balance in your life. I think for me, the attitude that I've taken is that, I will spend as much time in the hospital as I possibly can, because each minute, each hour that I spend in the OR is going to be something that's going to pay me back in the future and something that's going to make me grow as a vascular surgeon, as a doctor, as a person. And so I don't really have that classic, stereotypical millennial mindset that a lot of people refer to. But I'm not saying it's a bad mindset, but it's just something that never really was a part of me.
And actually, there's you're not the only person. There's actually many trainees that think the opposite, that this is their time to train, and so they're willing to put in the hours because this is what makes them who they're going to be when they graduate. You guys' opinion, Leanne, Sudie?
Yeah, I can echo that. I don't think that any of us could have come to the place that we have at this point in time if we were lazy. What I hear constantly is we have 5 years to learn to be safe and fantastic vascular surgeons. Anyone I talk to wants to spend the time in the hospital learning. So I wholeheartedly believe that spending more time in the hospital does not equate with better training or better trainee outcomes. I'd say that patients would be safer and trainees would increase their skills more quickly if they were adequately rested. And this is in no way a criticism, because I understand all the competing obligations required of attending physicians, but I'd encourage attendees on this call and on this webinar to quantify how many minutes they spent of direct teaching today with their trainees. And I think that if we worked on making trainee education and healthcare and the hospital systems in general more efficient, we'd find that 120 hours versus 80 hours wouldn't make a difference.
Sudie?
Yep. As for me, this idea or this notion of burnout, I'm still working on it. Like Manuel, I'm more on the end where I work and work and work until I can't anymore and get as much in as I possibly can. But as I get older, I guess, and more, I learn and I understand the need for actually being well rested, for taking time away, taking time off, and doing things that would help you to refresh and rejuvenate. My only thing about wellness is that I think it's more personal level where you need to do what works for you in order to rejuvenate or refresh. And having it being forced upon, organized may not necessarily always be the best thing for everyone or be suitable for everyone. So I feel like you should look introspectively and find the things that will make you feel better or rejuvenated or refreshed and do that.
Palma, you work all the time.
I'm workaholic. I know. I'm a work creator. I find stuff to do nonstop. We just finished a book chapter. Sudie helped me. It's like never ends. But I would agree with Leanne that there should be a more efficient way to do this. And I think it goes back to, I think earlier when we trained, we're all struggling, women at my level. I've been out in practice for 17 years. We didn't have mentors. We didn't have webinars. We didn't have vascular surgery interest groups. You had that like one woman that you could say, oh, well, she survived. I guess I can. And we had to find our way. So I think we probably could not be as efficient. And we felt like we had to prove ourselves more. So I think it's hard for physicians or women in my generation to actually unlearn that and kind of go back. But, I think we've made a lot of sacrifices that I don't expect the current generation to have to do. Because you know what? There was a lot of pain and suffering that went on that was unnecessary. And I don't think it needs to happen to others because it's happened to us, right? Although we do have a organized wellness bowling and different activities that our surgical group organizes. And I think they're great. I think they are great. But I do agree with Sudie that you need to find that one thing. I think some people are rock climbers, right? They do that for a hobby, or, I'm happy to do like a beach body workout. That's good for me, So I think we have to all look within ourselves and find how we find some peace and disconnect from all the craziness of everything that we do.
Very true. Okay, and so the next question, and so we sort of touched on this a little bit, but what are the issues that you think are unique to your trainee generation that are most misunderstood by senior mentors or old school mentors?
Yeah, I think definitely if you look at our generation as a whole, I think we do demand more balance in life. And this is not speaking for any individual trainee, but if you look at it as a whole, there's been a movement lately in medicine in general for physician burnout and work-life balance, and a lot of that comes because there's been more and more awareness about depression in physicians and suicide, and these things are very alarming. And so I think as a response to all these things that are happening, depression, suicide, alcohol and drug abuse, then we've now kind of shifted our focus into physicians having a more balanced life, and I think that's one of the issues that the more old school mentors may not completely understand where that's coming from, because they suffered, right? They went through this process where they were working 120 hours a week, and they weren't seeing their families for a whole month, and they think that this is the best way to get trained. And some of them, not all of them, but some of them think that this is what makes them great surgeons. And to an extent, I will agree that time in the OR and time operating and time seeing different types of pathologies is important. You know, if someone that did 500 aortic aneurysms during their training, open aortic aneurysms, is going to be more comfortable and better at aortic aneurysms coming out of training than someone who did 20 or 30. I think there's no argument there, but I think something has shifted in medicine, and that shift, I think, is a good thing. And that's that people are starting to see physicians not just as doctors and surgeons, but as people. And these are not just, machines that are going to, fix your heart. These are people with families and lives and that have feelings, and that's been given more importance. And I think maybe the pendulum has swung a little bit too much on the other way, where we've kind of prioritized, but I think the pendulum will eventually even out, and we'll find that balance between being adequately trained and at the same time having a decent life that's worth living, I guess.
Yeah. Leanne, thoughts?
Yes. I've also thought about the generational differences between more senior attendings and the millennial generation. So I think one of the main stereotypes is that millennials are sensitive, easily offended, and that translates to less resilient than those that came before us. I think many medical students and trainees on this call could remember a time where they overheard an attending say they have to be careful about what they say around us because they might get in trouble. But my take on it is that as millennials, we've grown up in this increasingly diverse and interconnected world, and with that comes an appreciation for the varied life experiences that people have and how this shapes the lens through which they view the world. So we understand that with that comes the responsibility to learn how to connect with and collaborate with people whose life experiences are different from ours. And this means contemplating the language we use and how our words may impact others. So I think that millennials are often unfairly labeled as overly sensitive, when in fact we're empathic in a different way than those that came before us.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, any other career or specialty, y'all are adults, right? I mean, you're like, even an intern is 20. I mean, they're adults. In the corporate world, you can't be screaming and yelling at adults. I mean, it's not appropriate. So, my Cassie Duran, the chief resident who graduated from here, I mean, she and I were talking about this the other day, and she said, yeah, I mean, it has to change, because in any other, like, corporate law, whatever, the trainees, they're not, it's not a hierarchy like you think, like you can treat everybody like trash, because you're adults, you have families, you're a father, you're a husband, you're a wife, and so it's not okay to belittle people in the OR and do the things that people used to do to trainees, and I think you can train someone into becoming a great vascular surgeon because they respect you and because they want to listen to you over, just fear or angry, explicatives in the OR.
I'd like to ask a little bit about, now that the pandemic has happened, I know Leanne got impacted on that with respect to interviews. Sudie will have to do virtual interviews here. Manny may have lost some OR time. How can we help make things better? How can we navigate this? I'm a program director, and we want to recruit great people. And how do we get to you or connect with the trainees?
So for that question, social media is going to play a huge role this year, especially. And I think a lot of the senior individuals are now getting on the handle of Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Zoom and all these different platforms, video platforms, to help us have a sense of what the program is like for me in particular, it was very hard because I couldn't do any away rotations. There were virtual away rotations, but didn't align with my schedule. And so it would be very difficult for me to do any of that to get to know a program. So I've resorted to using Instagram. And a lot of the residents, they have created accounts which shows or features a day in the life of a resident or the program directors. And it has really helped to give me a sense of what the nature of the program is like. What is a day in the life of a resident like? And what are some of the things that we can do in those areas? Also, they have had Zoom calls or calls where we talk to both program director and faculty, as well as residents alone. So they would have breakout sessions where you go into small groups and you're with just the residents, so you're able to speak candidly about those programs. And that has been super helpful along this whole path. Open houses, and I think the VEST did a residency fair, all virtually, using platforms like WOVA or something like that. The apps like that really helps us along the way. So I think, honestly, it's just gonna have to be social media, trying to get out there, at least get residents involved in posting a lot and taking pictures and making little videos to share with us all.
Manny?
Any comments about losing OR time, Manny? What are any concerns?
Yeah, that's been challenging, and I think as trainees, we've definitely slowed down. There's no doubt about it across the country that we're doing less cases, and we've been fortunate here at Methodist that we had a really high volume. At least my class had a very high volume before COVID hit, and so all of us were done with our case requirements by the end of fourth year. So now as fifth year residents, we have no pressure. So we could do no more cases for the rest of the year, and we would still be fine. But I know that that's not the case everywhere, and I think in terms of, obviously people need their numbers, and so if that means that people are going to have to double scrub cases that otherwise would have been only done by a single resident, and maybe two residents have to come in and do it, or three, it is what it is. And there's always learning to be had, and just because I think you're not the primary person throwing in the stitches, I think that if there's one case that's really interesting and a few people scrub it, everybody's going to learn from it. And so I think maybe we have to shift our focus and try to do that more. And then also I think from an attending perspective, they have more time now. Attendings are less busy with cases because they're operating less, which may change, but as of now, that's kind of the case. So maybe having attendings take more time to sit down with residents and go over cases. In the past, if you were doing 10 cases a day and you're all kind of running around with your hair on fire trying to get to the next case, and that was chaotic. Well, now maybe you have one case a day, but instead of doing 10 cases, you can sit and really think about this one case and really dissect this one case and say, okay, what were our options for this case? Why did we do this? And what could we have done better? So I think there's always more to learn from a single case if you take the time to sit down. And so I think that would be beneficial for trainees and mentors going forward if this continues long term.
Leanne, what about the Northeast? I mean, the culture of New York is very different from Texas. So what's going on in Rochester?
Yeah, so out of all the panelists, I feel the least impacted by COVID. Yes, our match day was canceled, and yes, the last few months of medical school were canceled. So we did come into intern year feeling a little rusty, but I think those things are trivial, truthfully, compared to everything else that's going on. And yeah, we're doing okay in Rochester up here. Like Sudie mentioned, we also are trying to get our name out there on social media. We have our Twitter and Instagram account, so we're trying to recruit virtually this year as well. I encourage everyone applying to follow us on social media. That'll be my one plug.
Yeah, Manny plugged our program by saying, 10 cases a day. That's 10 cases a day per attending, by the way, folks out there.
Yeah.
Okay?
That would be
And all open aortic, aortic.
That's all we do.
That's all we do.
We only do open aortas.
Yeah, exactly. Any questions from the audience? Just to remind you guys, you can join by web, go to pollev.com, enter DEBAKEY, or text DEBAKEY to 37607 for any questions. And then we will have one last question before we wrap it up. So do you feel that as a whole vascular surgery is improving their recruitment for minorities, this year, in the last few years, and anything we can work on?
I don't think that I can speak about vascular surgery as a whole, as a specialty, because I don't really know what goes on in other programs. I only know what goes on in our program, and I know that we try very hard to keep our program as diverse as we can. We kind of go out of our way to do that every year, and I think that some years it works out, some years it doesn't. But if you look at our program, I think we're fairly diverse. But I think diversity in vascular surgery, like we mentioned earlier, it really has to start from younger people. You have to recruit younger people. So when I was a medical student, I started a group where we would go out to high schools, and we would go and basically tell people in high school, like, hey, you can be a doctor, like, by the way, because you'd be surprised. A lot of people don't realize, like, oh, I could be a doctor. Like, that's a possibility. Mm-hmm. Some people just don't have that in their mind. And so if you kind of encourage people and plant that seed early on, I think that will translate to having a more diverse specialty in the long run. But those are my thoughts.
Leanne, Sudie?
As for me, I think in terms of the SBS, they have really tried to make strides in this area. For instance, Dr. Olivola has the Task Force for Equity and Diversity and Inclusion, and did a really great presentation on the stats of that and progress and ways in which we can improve diversity. However, to be honest, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. We spoke earlier that 2% of African American are 2% African American vascular surgeons. In terms of active membership, I believe.
Yes. And
that to me is appalling, and it needs to be changed. From not just gender or sexual orientation, but also racial diversity needs to be encouraged. In terms of working from earlier on, that is really important. Manny spoke about that. In addition to reaching individuals from early on, we have to work on retention as well, because you can always invite people in. You can always accept individual or African Americans or underrepresented minority groups, but not having the infrastructure or the resources to maintain or retain these individuals, that makes this all for naught. So having programs and having resources that once you accept these individuals, that will ensure their success and ensure good mentorship is key to having or increasing diversity, and starting earlier on, especially with pipeline programs. Developing a direct line from college forward would be is imperative to have those programs available to students of color, students of underrepresented groups as well.
And Leanne?
That's wonderful. I agree with everything that was said so far. I'll say I'm aware of the Sbs Task Force. I will throw it out there and say that maybe the optics are not the best, because I think the leader of the task force is not a person of color. I think we fell short with that. And if there was the opportunity to do that going forward, I think that would make a large impact. I know Sudie said something powerful earlier, saying that for her, seeing someone of color in a position of leadership and authority is a motivator in the long run. So I encourage this task force to continue all the hard work that they've been doing. I know they put a proposal out, so I'm looking forward to seeing what the actions and what tangible outcomes will have come from this. As far as recruiting diverse candidates into our program at URMC, we are always looking for ways to do this better. I recognize that I come from a perspective or have privilege, and that I need to use that privilege to serve as an advocate in order to help recruit more diverse candidates into our field and to help them become amazing vascular surgeons.
All great thoughts. Y'all are all so brilliant. I was not like this at all when I was going through training. I was just trying to, everyone's so introspective. You know, I was just like, oh, I just need to go home. I'm so tired.
I'm just going to show up early and hope I survive.
Yeah, exactly. I do have one comment. So for applicants, I've seen programs that have had their residents make a web page where that contains bio info on the residents and what they like, dislike about the program and location. I found that it gave me a sense of who I would work with and what life would be like. So.
Good idea.
That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I know that we have our resident bios on our webpage. I'm not sure we have advertised what we dislike about the program, but that is a great suggestion.
Well, y'all love everything about our program.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, thank you to all of our guest speakers today. Good luck in matching and good luck in the rest of your training. Palma, any last minute comments?
No, I'm just, I'm appreciative that they were able to come on, and all the great thoughts that they had were wonderful. So hopefully everyone watching will be smarter like we are now, and we can just be better. We just want to help people. And I recognize it and agree with what Sudie's saying, that we do need more representation of diversity. It's, you know, it's the retention. I agree. It's hard. People start, and how they're going to finish. And you need to not only let people in, you have to support them all the way through. Because, you know, if your daddy isn't a doctor, or nobody in your family's been a doctor, I mean, how do you find your way? I mean, my dad was a bartender, you know, I mean, I can't mix a drink. So, you know, I think that I was lucky to find my way through, you know, and like Sudie said, when I fell down, I got back up, and we all do that, and we just need to support each other so we can all get through.
For those mentors watching, I think one thing to get out of this is that most mentees and most trainees are dying to be mentored. You know, they look up to you guys. You guys are our heroes, like I said earlier, and especially at the level of college student, medical student. I mean, vascular surgeons to them are like incredible, you know, and they really just want to be acknowledged, and like, you know, they don't want to be just a fly on the wall. They want attendings to really acknowledge them, to feel like the attendings actually care to know their name and what they like and how their morning is going, because I think that goes a long way. We tend to forget, as in vascular surgery, we're so busy and we're running around and we're taking care of patients, and we tend to forget some of the trainees that are younger, some of the college students, some of the medical students. They tend to be kind of just ornaments in the OR, and we, you know, kind of stick them in a corner. But I think something that some of the trainees that were the most impactful to me were those that acknowledged me and said, "Hey, good morning. How are you? How's your day going? You know, how's the rotation going?" And just doing little things like that and opening the door, especially for minority students and students that are underrepresented. They tend to be, speaking from a personal perspective, they tend to be more intimidated by attendings, more intimidated because it's feels less approachable. If nobody in your family is a doctor and you see a doctor and you want to be a doctor, it's a lot more intimidating. And so if you have that doctor go up to you and say, "Hi, how are you?" Just feeling that they care about you, I think is huge and goes a long way in recruiting people.
Hey, you burned my finger.
That's true.
Manny burned my finger as a pre-intern. That's why we kept him. He's great in the OR.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining. That was a great show. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.